Welcome, everybody, to the Power of Connection Chat. My name is Bobby Umar, and I'm here with Unstoppable Tracy Schmidt, Michael Bach, and Jenny Okonkwo. Welcome to my show. You can talk now. Excited? Yeah, let's get excited. I was like, don't say anything, and now we can talk. Yeah, that's good. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's so exciting to be here, Bobby. The hardest thing in the world is to tell 4 speakers they can't speak.
Right. Yes. So we are live now on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on Facebook, and we're here to talk about. We have a big event coming up next week called Community Builders in Crisis. And if you're joining the Power Connection chat for the first time, again, let us know, comment below, let us know where you're from. Are you calling in from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia? We'd love to know because we've had people from across all different parts of the world. And I usually broadcast on Wednesdays, but today's a special day because on Friday, we're just trying to share what's going on. And so we're really excited about that. We definitely want you to engage on your phones, and so share your comments. You can type. You can also do the like, the hand clap, the heart, the light bulb, all those different things you can do on the phone. So make sure you tap that, bring people, tag people, join the conversation, share it on your own page. Let's bring people part of the conversation. So Jacob says hello, Shabir says hello. That's awesome. So glad to hear all of you. Now, that being said, what is going on next week? Well, I collaborated with Lee Mitchell from Women in Biz Network and Bill Banham from the Innovate Work HR group, and all of our startups were kind of impacted because of COVID. A lot of our volunteers left, a lot of our team members left. We tried doing some events, but I did an event in May last year. It did not go well. I love all of Tracy's fantastic. I feel like you're really emoting for me. That's great. So we decided, and then I ran an event in November, and it was just so much work just to get people out. And I was like, oh yeah. So we collaborated. Our communities are struggling, whether it's business communities, entrepreneur communities, nonprofits, charities, social justice. They're all struggling to deal with COVID, and there's lots of issues there. So we're running this event. It's a free event, February 25th. If you want to sign up, check the link in the post. It's ourcommunitybuilders.com. You can check that out. We'd love to have you there. That said, I brought 3 of our featured speakers and panelists that are going to be there speaking. So let's start off with maybe I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. How about that? We'll start with Jenny. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody?
So hi, everyone. My name's Jenny Okonkwo, and I'm founder of Black Female Accountants Network. This type of topic is really relatable to me, very close to my heart. So when Bobby put the call out, absolutely I jumped in. So yeah, very excited to have this conversation with everyone.
All right, Michael, go ahead.
So I'm Michael Bach. I am the CEO of the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and I'm also the author of a little book, if I can do that.
Sure,
Birds of All Feathers. I'm going to just attach it to my head. Birds of All Feathers, Doing Diversity and Inclusion Right. It is a best-selling book for 1 week, but anyway. And I'm really happy to be here. I do anything that Bobby tells me. Bobby tells me to show up for a live stream. I show up for a live stream. That's how this works.
Oh, you're too kind, Michael. Too kind. And next up, Unstoppable Tracy Schmidt.
I thought an opportunity to be with 3 other unstoppable souls: Bobby, multiple TEDx, Jenny, just rocking it out on the other side of the world, and Michael, and near and dear to my heart with diversity. But I am Unstoppable Tracy, more about Unstoppable You, because I love to disarm limiting beliefs. And lucky enough to be in Oprah magazine, and a decorated athlete, a World Cup sailor, and honored humanitarian in Canada Hall of Fame, seen in Oprah magazine, and some very fun reach, 100 million views with a video about my kindergarten story of all things.
Awesome. And go ahead, Jenny.
So, Bobby, I'm going to jump in because I was sort of, I think it's a bit of the English reserve. So I kind of want to mention a couple of things.
Yeah,
taking cues from my two esteemed speakers here. So the first thing is I do want to give a shout out to all of the co-authors who contributed during the pandemic to also a best-selling book, 21 of Us, 21 Resilient Women. So I want to shout out for that book. And also to add that I am a CPA by background and moved into D&I about 3 years ago. I serve on the AICPA National Commission on Diversity and Inclusion, and I'm also a former member of the CPA Canada Women in Leadership Ambassadors Group, as well as being the president of Black Female Accountants Network. So I thought I should, just elaborate a little bit more.
No, I love that. And, I'm a personal branding, I'm a thought leadership branding advocate. So I talk about that several times. So by all means, let's make sure we brand you in the best light possible. So, but let me get into, let's dive right in. So obviously the reason we're doing this event is because a lot of communities, not just communities and members, but also the leaders themselves are struggling. So maybe, Michael, let me ask you. I mean, I know you work with leaders of different organizations. So, how are they emotionally handling this past year? Like, can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, this has been such a challenge around the sort of intangible of how to deal with a pandemic, because of course, no one had written the handbook on how to deal with a pandemic. I don't think people have truly anticipated the emotional impact, the mental health impact of, being in your home for a year, not being able to have human contact for a year. And leaders are, I think, struggling more in that they're not supposed to let the cracks show. Right. They're never supposed to be able to be like, you know what? I'm really struggling. I had a really crappy week, or here's what's going on with me. They're supposed to be the ones who are strong and saying like, no, we've got this. We can beat this. And in the meantime, in the background, they're really struggling. So it has been a significant challenge for leaders themselves, but then they have to deal with the same things with all of their people. And it has really been a tough road to travel.
I appreciate it. Thank you for that. And Jenny, how about you? Are you engaging other community leaders and maybe share some thoughts on what you're seeing?
Yes, absolutely. So when the pandemic hit, as far as the network was concerned, we had to quickly take a moment and work out how we were going to stay relevant. So we are known as being an in-person model of excellence for what we do in the community, but we had never done anything virtual. And so we had to really look at what we were doing, how we do it, the work that we do, and how we were going to pivot. And so we spent last summer mobilizing a task force, and we managed a digital transformation from an in-person model of excellence to now being fully virtual. And the acid test for that was that we executed on our third annual Women in Leadership Conference, which is normally in person. The beauty of doing it virtually was that became our first national, international, as well as virtual conference. So typically it would be GTA centric because that's where we're based. But then we had members all over Canada and also beyond Canada, our membership beyond Canada be able to attend. And that was just phenomenal. And that was just the proof that we'd done it. We'd done it, and we were able to stay relevant to our membership and cater for their needs.
Very nice. And, when it comes to leadership and getting through resilient situations, there's no one better than Unstoppable Tracy. So why don't you share your thoughts on, have you been talking to leaders too and what they're going through, and maybe what are some advice you're giving to them?
Yes. Well, and just sort of to pick up on everybody, when Michael started about how leaders felt like they had to have a brave face. And when I worked at Air Canada, one of the courses I delivered was in the event of an emergency, of a crash or an accident, and that we hope nobody ever has to use this. but training people. And there's this idea where you can't cry when others have a greater need or when you're the leader. And in fact, what the psychologist coached us was that it actually validates and gives. Now, I mean, I don't mean bawling your eyes out beyond control, but welling up and expressing yourself a little bit about the pain that you're also feeling is quite validating for teams when there's a crisis. And I would say that this sort of fits along those lines. And just last week, I was talking to Kevin Frankish. He's a breakfast television host and big in wellness. And he asked me, he's like, Tracy, what do you think the opposite of depression is? And I'm, you know, power of positivity. I'm like enthusiasm. And he said, you know, that plays a part, but actually the opposite is hope. And if people have no hope. And so that's what I've seen in speaking with leaders out there. You know, before March, people were asking me for grit and for, you know, being unstoppable. And people are saying, well, so how do these people crush obstacles and stop their excuses? And this is why people were hiring me in great change, because they wanted people to be change capable. And obviously we need that now more than ever. But instead, what people are bringing me in for, and we're talking like Facebook and Loblaws and big organizations, not like also entrepreneurs and small organizations, but from 12 people staff to 40,000 staff, Centene in the US, they're all asking for appreciation. They're all saying, Tracy, can you share your story? Because they've done everything they can upside down and backwards, and they have no idea how they're going to face another month. So will you come in and just validate that we're grateful for what they've done and that they're in there and that they're doing the very best they can, and just acknowledge that even though we don't know how, we will survive, and give them hope. And so it's sort of like losing without my legs, I don't know how I'm going to ski, and wiping out a gazillion times for several years, and then sitting on a bench next to my ski instructor, I think, oh my gosh, my thighs could fit in his ski boots. And I ended up skiing with my stumps, because my legs end above knees, in men's ski boots backwards. But how is that relevant to the community in crisis now? Is that we weren't going to figure it out sitting on my couch, right? I had to get out there. I had to get started, even though I didn't know. And so I think this community event that you're offering, Bobby, and that Jenny offered was magical at being a leadership resource in Michael's world. You guys are lifelines. Like when I'm rappelling, you guys are the safety line, because we're all out there on a cliff. But we're not out there alone, and we've got your upcoming event that's just going to fill our souls and have us feel unstoppable again.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, yeah, we're here talking at the Power Connection chat, talking about community builders in crisis. I'm talking to 3 of the speakers for the event next week. It's a free event. Register. It's actually it's being sponsored by an event conference, virtual event conference thing. So it's going to look really cool. There's like, and when you go through it's cool. You go and you enter. There's like an opening room, and then you go to a lounge, and you can talk to people. Yeah, we're even having an after party with games. We're gonna do karaoke. We're gonna do like
nice. Okay.
We're gonna play categories, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So
fun.
Yeah. So definitely check it out. The link is at ourcommunitybuilders.com. I was gonna share. What's that?
Will you say that again slower?
The website is ourcommunitybuilders.com. That's what it is, because we plan to do more community building events. We actually just talked about this morning about what's our next event going to be. And so we're going to do in June, community builders breaking through the crisis and moving forward. So that's what it's going to be about. But what I was going to say, I was going to share, for me, the hardest thing about being a community organizer and leader was talking to my one staff member and saying that I can't afford to pay you. It was just the worst conversation. Like, oh God, because I only had one. I had one staff, and she was really great, and we finally came to agreement to. She took like a 2-month break, and then I brought her in part-time in minimal hours, but it was something. But it's just a conversation. I just felt so terrible because I was like, and I knew it wasn't my fault. I mean, I just had to do what I had to do, and I had to cut all costs as I could, and it was very a hard conversation. I don't like doing that kind of stuff.
No.
Listen, I felt the same way when March hit and business dried up, and it did very quickly in our organization. You know, we got to May and actually had to have a conversation about insolvency. And
wow,
that was a really awful moment for me. I founded this organization. I've been at it for 8 years, and I don't have one. I have 32 staff. Wow. And I wasn't thinking about myself at that point. I was thinking about all of them. We've had the opposite effect, and for better or for worse, with the murder of George Floyd, our business went through the roof, and we're doing a ton of work now. We now have a staff of 55. And the problem we're dealing with now is making sure that everyone is taking care of themselves mentally.
Yeah.
And the number of conversations that I've had with team members where we're crying and they're really struggling is pretty prolific.
And I'm glad you brought that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Jenny, talk about that, please.
Yeah, no, so that's really interesting insights and experiences. And I suppose in many ways I wear multiple hats. So there are many expressions of myself depending in which capacity that I'm operating in. So from Black Female Accountants Network, lovingly known as BFAN standpoint, in some ways it was the reverse. And what I mean by that is because everyone was suddenly locked in their homes, and BFAN is a volunteer-led, totally volunteer-managed organization with over 1,400 members. And so what you found was that people were looking for that sense of community. So when it came to us doing a full restructure of our organization as part of the digital transformation that we undertook last summer, we had a lot of people wanting to get involved in volunteer roles to maintain that sense of community and to have some sort of connection, you know, while they're sort of stuck at home. And if you can imagine, it calls for a very different type of leadership competence and expertise to be able to lead a group of high caliber volunteers as a volunteer yourself, because I don't have any paychecks to offer anybody, right? So that's not the motivation here. It's not about getting paid. You have to find what it is that drives and motivates people in a non-financial way to get results and get things done. And I'm very proud to be able to sit here and say, because of our phenomenal teamwork, we have achieved that year on year, and every year it grows. Now, in terms of my day job and the former organization that I was working for, very similar to Michael's experiences. And the job that I was doing was very much facing into employers, engaging employers, connecting them to programs and services for workplace diversity and inclusion with an immigrant inclusion lens. And yes, when it hit, I thought, okay, how on earth am I going to make my targets? You know, all the employers put their shutters down. And so, you know, I used various techniques to keep those employer relationships warm. And then to Michael's point, as tragic as it was, as soon as the murder of George Floyd happened, we were inundated, absolutely inundated. And I was able to, you know, make my targets, and I always make my targets, but that definitely had such a prolific shift in the marketplace and the way that organizations wanted to be perceived in terms of how they were reacting to it. And the LinkedIn environment became very, very interesting in terms of an environment to watch, in terms of lots of CEO statements being put out, organization statements being put out. But that was one part of it. What was interesting is I was really monitoring the comments and seeing how the employees were reacting to those statements. Some were favorable, some weren't so favorable. So yeah, the whole landscape was very, very interesting. And yeah, there was definitely, I guess, some sort of gauge as to who was getting involved, who was walking the talk, or was it just, a statement to be put out for statement's sake? It was interesting from a diversity and inclusion perspective. It was an interesting time.
Can I follow on that? Because I think it's an important thing that you mentioned, Jenny, and that is kind of the double whammy of COVID with Black Lives Matter finally getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear from you, Jenny, because I've heard it a ton from other people of Black Afro-Caribbean heritage about the impact that had on them and the spotlight that put up other people of color, yes, but particularly Black people, where employers were turning to them and saying, okay, please help us end racism.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an extremely interesting point, Michael, and that conversation could go on for 7 hours. But just in terms of my own perspective, and I'm not going to attempt to speak for the whole Black community because that would be inappropriate, but what I would say is that allyship suddenly really came under the radar and how it was being demonstrated. So I have to tell you, when the protests started and seeing non-Black people wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, for me, was a game changer. I have to tell you, I have 2 teenage sons. One has started university. I did not expect to have to be having a conversation around what happened to George Floyd to my sons in 2020. And to be in that situation was extremely disheartening. And of course, not just that event, but other events that were happening both here in Canada, in the US, the UK, very, very difficult. And in terms of the workplace, I think allyship really it kind of evolved. And so it was a case where, first of all, as Catalyst spells it out really well, support in silence is not support. If you see something, say something.
Right.
The other thing is understanding it. To be a true ally, you have to understand that it's really not for the Black community to educate you on what's going on. There is so much out there with the internet. It might have been different pre-internet. So that's before the early 90s. Well, we're so far ahead of that time now. And so really to understand this dynamic, you have to be willing to educate yourself so that you can understand the struggle and understand that when an employee comes to you and says, this is what is happening, to be a true ally, you have to believe them. You have to believe that they are speaking their truth. And so that's where the whole thing about inclusive workplaces comes in. Is the workplace conducive for a Black employee to feel they can share? Now, Catalyst have done some research very recently and have said that, 77% of men and women of color are on guard at work. They are on guard for the whole 9 to 5.
Wow.
So, that's a huge statistic. So that's the situation. Michael, did that answer your question?
Absolutely, it does. And it's one thing for me to say it, but I am this, basically transparent human being. Yeah. I think the reality is for people of color that, COVID for everyone else was here, and for people of color, it went up to here. Yeah. For Black respondents, for Indigenous people, for other people of color, if we look at the statistics, I forget what the number was, but I think Black individuals in the city of Toronto represented like 23% of hospitalizations due to COVID, and they make up 8% of the population.
Right.
That's right.
It's just the numbers that we've seen.
Yeah, that's right. And part of that is due to the fact of the occupation sectors. So if you're a knowledge worker, you have that advantage of being able to work remotely. If you're within the essential services sector, hospitality, certain sectors, you don't have that option. So part of it is definitely occupation sector specific that is driving those numbers for sure.
Mm-hmm. And what's really great about this panel. I didn't plan this. It just ran. I asked which speakers wanted to come speak on this live stream, and 3 of you represent very diverse groups, as do I. So it's actually good that we're steering the conversation's direction. Tracy, what were you going to say?
I find it interesting. She brings up the word allyship, and where that word is now almost becoming a bad word because of the inappropriate use of, as Jenny described, ally, and how people. And I find like it's for this same reason. People said people who are challenged, and we go through this evolution of language in the world of people with disability, and it's not really the language, it's what happens afterwards. And so allyship, as she said, is you do your education. It's not up to us to do that, for example, but people come out, and I know when somebody says, oh, I'm an ally, that's almost a flag, a warning flag. Because the difference, and so what I prefer instead, now that allyship has metamorphosized into something that might be taboo because they don't understand, is more of a sponsorship, and not sponsorship and funding, but let's who are we listening that can invite Jenny to the table of these influential meetings, right? Can Michael and Tracy and Bobby create a space where Jenny is her own voice for her audience, and not be an ally where we speak for Jenny because we love Jenny and we admire Jenny and we respect her leadership? How do we facilitate? And it's funny, men do so well in the business world because they're so great at, like, the old boys club, and they say, oh, I'm looking to hire, and they're all around the golf club having their cognac, and they say, oh, have you ever considered? Because there's this sponsorship, there's this name thrown into the table. And so I think that's what we originally intended with allyship for people with disabilities or people of color or people who are lesbian, bi, gay, trans, queer, plus, is nothing about us without us. Don't speak because you love Tracy, but invite Tracy to speak for herself as a voice for herself. And I really respect, and I'd like to distinguish how Jenny said, I can speak for myself. She doesn't speak for the whole Black community. I can speak for four-way amputee unstoppable Tracy. I do not speak for the entire disabled population. And so I think that they were, like, even unintentionally, we were all getting some real golden nuggets in diversity, inclusion, and equity just by the way Jenny expressed herself, which I highly respected and admired. And so careful when you say you are an ally. Let's just let the people speak for themselves. And is it appropriate to say one more thing, Bobby, or do you want to throw something in before I carry on?
Yeah, go. If you have something else to say, go for it.
I do. So one of the other things that happened in Black Lives Matter in my world is that a lot of people that are specifically organizations for people with disabilities was, at first it was almost like, now we're going to go backwards. People with disabilities, just like people who are working front lines of color are, and have I used that expression appropriately? Is it okay to say that, Jenny?
Yeah, no worries.
No worries. Are the ones with the higher COVID rates. And it's also true of people with disabilities and people that have a disability, but they don't identify as having a disability. They have some kind of mobility impairment or something, are higher too. But because there's such a focus on Black Lives Matter, then people with disabilities with employment and other pieces. But the distinction there is, although, and what I loved about what happened there is microaggressions. Like when we used to say things like, oh, I don't even see color, or I don't even see that you have a disability. People think that's a positive thing to say, and they don't know that that's a microaggression. So there was an elevated knowledge because of Black Lives Matter about unconscious biases, the unintentional things that we say that are suppressing. But the difference between the world of people with disabilities is, yes, there might be suppression with unemployment, for example, but I'm not going to be killed because I have a disability. Yeah. Whereas Black Lives Matter, the reason it's so extraordinarily different is that you can die because of the color of your skin, which is very different than the world of people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said that, because I remember when it all happened, and I know we're kind of segueing to this other topic, but it's an important topic. One of my friends, Curtis, he did this video, and he was really, he was crying, and he was upset up and worried for his life and the safety of his life and his family. And I said that as a brown person, I've never felt that way. I mean, I've certainly felt threatened. I've certainly, or in certain situations, certainly, but it's not the same. It's not the same. And it's just so much more scarier and harder for Black people. And I just, it's very jarring. And I know this has been, I'm glad I got all three of you to share your perspectives. I kind of want to switch a little bit because we're trying to talk about Community Builders in Crisis, our event on February 25th at www.ourcommunitybuilders.com. It's a free event. There's some amazing speakers, including these three. I did want to ask you guys what you thought about the importance of community and why is community so important for ourselves, for the people we gather with, for society, for the economy. I just want to get your take on that.
Sure. So I'll kick that off if I may. It's funny because when I was involved in writing the book 21 Resilient Women, one of the quotes that gets referred to a lot is where I talk about limitations of personal achievement and the fact that achievement can go so much further when you're in a collective. And the reason why, from my perspective, community is so incredibly important is really the whole thing that you may have a particular perspective on your own. You may have seen certain things on your own. You may even champion a cause on your own. But what I have learned in my 5 years as founder and president of Black Female Accountants Network is the power of the collective voice. And also how you are able to, even from a very personal point of view, grow both personally and professionally by being within a community. And also not wanting to go back to where we've just come from, but sometimes when you're, well, not sometimes, but frequently when you're from an underrepresented group, having that sense of community perhaps outside the workplace is a very, very useful coping mechanism for when you step back into that environment where, again, you may be the only. And that can be really tough. And so having that sense of community in terms of BFAN, it's almost like a public ERG. Right? Like, for those members who maybe do not have access to ERGs, maybe their organizations don't have ERGs, BFAN definitely serves that role. And so with our core pillars around career advancement, economic empowerment, building and developing leaders, developing a legacy for future. The way BFAN started wasn't because I had a great brainwave. How it started was in 2014, me being pinged on a regular basis from young women from my community saying, Jenny, you've got an amazing finance and accounting background. I'm currently on a finance and accounting program at, so-and-so flagship Canadian university, but I'm dropping out. I'm seriously thinking of dropping out. And, this is all happening online. I don't know these young women, but immediately that surrogate mother chip kicks in and I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Yeah. What's going on? And they say to me, and it was resounding. I could have put it on a tape and played it back. Every time I go into an internship, first, second, third, I did not see anyone who looked like me. Very, very hard to be what you can't see, to aspire to be what you can't see. And so what our community does is show these youth that, yes, we have partners, in the Big Four. We have CFOs, we have VPs, we have directors. You need to see it to believe it. So the sense of community is very, very powerful. Like I could have tried to run around coaching these young women, but how much can one person do? It's impossible, right? But with a collective, we have moved mountains in our small period of existence. So that's what I would say about community from the BFAN perspective.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Certainly. I think community it's critical to It's the glue that keeps the fabric of our country together. And I think about when I first came out as gay in, I was about 1812, 1813, I forget. It was a long time ago. Just gonna adjust the face back into place. You know, when I came out, I'll tell you, it's 1987. There was no like Will and Grace or Elton John. Elton John was still straight at the time, whoever that was a thing, I don't know. But the thing that made it so that I could, you know, be safe and, you know, come to terms with my identity was the queer community, was being able to go to Church Street in Toronto or Davie Street in Vancouver or St. Catherine in Montreal and really just feel like I'm amongst my people. And I look at the community that my parents live north of Kingston in the middle of nowhere. But the thing that keeps their communities together is their church. And it's a united church, very progressive and welcoming. And there's just this sense of community. And one of the things that has broken me and just devastated me throughout this pandemic is the impact that it's having on community organizations that are, you know, closing their doors and struggling to make ends meet. And I know that there's the impact on you know, small business owners and the food service and retail has been just devastating. But I think about the nonprofits and the charities that they don't have savings. They don't have reserve funds. They don't have places that they can turn. And that piece is this is the sort of keep me up at night, because I think, what are we going to do? You know, we need that sense of community because it holds people together, whether that community is about your ethnocultural identity, about your ability, about your sexuality or your gender or what it is. It holds you together, and we need those community organizations, or as a country, I think we're in deep trouble.
Tracy, what about you? What do you think?
You know, what was coming to mind was in the World Cup sailing world, the people competing to get to the top are always so protective of, you know, oh, their sail's not set right. And they won't shout over, you know, let off your boom bang so you get more speed out of your sail. But the people that are getting first place and are the gold Olympians, whether it's the Paralympic sailing or the gold Olympic sailing, able-bodied world, either or, the people that are getting first place on a regular basis, they are unbelievably generous. They constantly shout, "Oh, you got a stern line dragging," or, you know, you're too tight on your main. Like they shout and they coach and they're generous. And I mean, literally, you hear of people are neck and neck at the top mark. It's the last leg of the race, and it is first and second. And any millimeter of an adjustment is going to change who gets first in that race. And they will shout over, "Hey, you got a line dragon." And that line might be the difference between them winning or not, but they don't want to win that way, right? They want to win authentically. And it makes me think, although that is a very individual sport when it's a one-person boat, how even then it's that community, and that boat takes builders and coaches and family sacrifices, and it's a whole community that supported me on my journey in the sailing world. And when I think of leadership development courses at Shoppers Drug Mart, when we brought in the high performance like Achieve Global or Stephen Covey's 7 Habits or Ken Blanchard, all of these high performance courses on leadership, on decision making, one thing they talk about is, so as a leader, you know, you share the why and let the people that are doing the work determine the how.
Absolutely.
And when people helicopter in and try to tell you how to do it, but the thing is, unless you gather feedback and you bring in that input and that people are part of the decision-making process, you can't turn that ship. You can't turn the Titanic, right? The whole community's got to be part of what's the decision for the next step and feel a part of it so that they want to, because they feel a sense of ownership in it. And that's before the pandemic. So now we're in crisis. It's even more important that people are involved in the solution finding and involved in the how it's going to happen, and not a one-person direction show.
Wow, some great insights from all of you. And again, we're talking about our Community Builders in Crisis event next week, February 25th. I'm just really amazed with all the information insights you've all shared. There's been some great comments too from people. A lot of people someone quoted Michael, community is the glue that keeps the fabric of our country together. You know, the reason I talk about community is because in my work, my first TEDx talk that I did, it was called the 5 C's of Connection. And so I said, the way you do it is if you care genuinely about something and you communicate in a more proactive way versus just, passively, you can create a connection. But once you create enough deep and powerful connection, you create a community. And when you have a strong, connected community, that's when you create change.
Yeah. Wow.
And so for me, that's how I did that. And I even love the discussion about allyship. I actually did a LinkedIn stories that was featured by LinkedIn on allyship. I actually talked about how to be an ally. And I know some people don't like that word, but that was the word I was using. But I said, number 1, listen. Number 2, learn. And then lead yourself to do that. Because my dad always told me when I was growing up, he's like, if we want, and he's coming from the brown Pakistani Muslim perspective, right? But he was like, if we want to get equality, we want to get that. We need to get the people who are not like us on board. Mm-hmm. And like, so anyone who's not Muslim, who's not Pakistani, you need to get them on our side too. Like, oh, okay. And I never thought about that as a kid, but I now know what he was talking about, because we have to have a conversation with everybody as that. So I really appreciate everyone being here. A lot of people are putting some great comments in here, which is awesome. Before we end, because we've gone now for 40 minutes, before we end, I want to see if there's anything that you want to share or promote, or let us know kind of where we can learn about you and your organization. And one last kind of takeaway before we end. So let's start with Jenny, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So first of all, Bobby, I just want to say that the 5 C's that you mentioned absolutely in a nutshell spelt out BFAN's journey. 100%.
Wow. Okay.
So that, as soon as you started reeling off each of the C's, I thought that's BFAN. Bobby's just explained BFAN in like 2 seconds, and I might have to copyright that when I'm promoting the network. Yes, exactly. And so I guess in terms of where people can find us, our social media handle is at BFAN Network, which is BFANNETWORK, and that will lead you to all the different places that we're at once you Google that. And in terms of takeaways, I think it's all been said, the just the power of community and us who are community leaders, how much we grow from that community engagement and that involvement, and then taking it a step further to find and build and deepen relationships with other community leaders. Mm-hmm. So when we were doing this whole digital transformation, I'm not the Oracle from the Matrix movie. I don't have all the answers. So where did I get help? I went to peer community professional networks, and their leaders really helped BFAN to get to the next level in COVID. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, go ahead.
Well, let's see. If you want to learn more about the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, you can go to ccdi.ca. And on social media, they are at CCDI Social. And we have a fantastic conference coming up in April. 2 days in English in April and 1 day in French in May. It's the same conference on the English days. We just do it at different times because we have 47 time zones in Canada. And then, of course, buy this book. Just buy it. Just have this book. I have like 47,000 copies in my garage. Please buy it. It's available wherever you buy books, as long as they're selling mine. Or you can go to michaelbach.com and click on the books to find out where you can get your copy. And if you want to connect with me, I am at DiversityDudeMB on all of the socials.
Nice.
I'll stop talking.
All right. Finally, Unstoppable Tracy.
I can't begin to understand what's going on in our listeners' worlds, like with their business, with bankruptcy, with layoffs, in their families, with relationships and divorce and horrible, horrific things I don't even want to put words to. We know what the phone-in line rates are, 600% times what they were, with some horrific needs. But I know that as a four-way amputee, I have every reason that nobody would judge me for. Like all of you, 24 hours, 24 stages canceled, right? And no one would judge me. But I do know that when I live a life of no excuses, even though that's some tough love, when I live a life of no excuses, I get to live a life of no limits. And so the unstoppable you is exceed uncertainty. Feeling uncertain is no excuse for inaction when you're falling out of your boat. Embrace possibility, even if you don't know how. Get started, don't avoid failure, and earn independence. But you don't earn independence alone. You join us for Community Builders in Crisis, and you have some extraordinary lifelines that are coming on February 25th. And we all want to be your lifeline here. So please do reach out for Unstoppable Tracy. And I also have a bestseller book. You can have a free download if you visit my website or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. And I have a podcast as well, Unstop the Story. Unstop the Story. You just visit Unstoppable Tracy. So unstoppable, I have 2 P's. Bobby has 2 P's. I have 2 P's. Unstoppable Tracy, and no extra parts. I like to joke. No hands, no legs, no letter E in Tracy.
And very quickly, guys, for those of you who missed the start of the broadcast, 21 Resilient Women. I've got to do another shout out to the awesome 21 co-authors of that anthology. Go grab it. It's on Amazon, 21 Resilient Women.
Yeah, and if you do watch the replay will be on all the different sites, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can comment, you can ask questions, you can tag us with more comments and questions. And the event, February 25th, I want to mention a bit about it.
Yeah.
So we have 4 keynote speakers. We have Mohammed Faki, the CEO of Paramount Foods, who's doing a ton of community work and with donating his time and energy to helping people. We have Claude Silver, who is the Chief Heart Officer of VaynerMedia under Gary Vaynerchuk. She's going to talk about it from a business perspective, the community that she holds there. We have Dwayne Gibson, who's going to end with an inspirational talk. We also have Kirsten Stewart, who is she's part of the World Economic Forum. She was also former Twitter head of Canada as well back in the day. And then we have 2 panels. We have a panel talking about community builders in crisis and talking to various leaders. Michael's going to be on that panel. There's a couple of panels in there that are from like CSI and from Ryerson and a bunch of other people. And then Jenny's going to be moderating the second panel, which is going to be on virtual versus real office spaces. Unstoppable Tracy will be there as well as some other people. And there's going to be networking, and there's going to be some breakout sessions and some group discussions. And at the very end, there's going to be an after party where we're going to have some fun and just build community and feel and go through this together. So a lot of opportunity to put your questions in, comment with people, engage, meet lots of amazing people. So it's all free. So ourcommunitybuilders.com. Check it out in the link in the post here, and we look forward to seeing you all there. I want to thank Unstoppable Tracy, Jenny, and Michael for being part of this discussion. We really appreciate your time and energy. Thank you so much.
Thanks ever so much. It was great. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to, go ahead, Jenny.
People can connect with me on LinkedIn, Jenny Okonkwo, and my Twitter handle @Jenny Okonkwo. I need to get better at the self-promotion. So
well, just say, reach out to me. You put your links in the comments, and that way it saves time. So put your links in the comments, and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much for joining the Power Connection chat. We usually go every Wednesday, but today we made a special exception for these exceptional people. So thanks so much. So long. Have a lovely weekend.
Cheers. Bye.